Isaiah 13, verse 11 says, "And I will visit upon the world their evil, and upon the wicked their iniquity. And I will cause their arrogancy of the proud to cease, and will lay low the haughtiness of tyrants." This is God's promise that he will deal with the evil of this world. And we see this in chapter 18, where God is finally dealing the destruction that the harlot or the great city Babel has completely earned. The wages of sin, that is something that they have earned. You are paid your wages. And the way that they were treating God's holy people and the way they were dealing out evil to the rest of the world is going to be finally dealt with. And when God acts with his justice and his wrath, it is perfect and no man can criticize. We thank you so much for joining our walkthrough study. We are picking back up with chapter 18, part 2, and we are starting with verse 14. All right, 14, which it says, "And the fruit that was satisfaction for your spirit will leave you, and all the calculations will not be found again." So again, you notice that she is selling two things. She's selling merchandise and she is
Mhm.
selling her whoredom, her religious ideology, her
Yes,
prostitution, her sin. She's selling her
right.
sin and her merchandise. We have that here present in this sentence, this summation,
Hmm.
saying the fruit was the satisfaction. She's selling the lust, the sin, the sexual
And she's
satisfaction.
right. And she's doing it on every platform that she can find. And
Mhm,
she's going to get it to everyone that she will and possibly can.
mhm.
And so that's the reason why the computers are important today because it's easy to reach everyone.
Yep.
Television, computer, you name it, all these devices.
hmm Yep. And then you see calculations. Those are the merchandisers making the money.
Hmm.
All the number changing,
That's
making
right.
all the money. Yep.
That's right. They will not be able to calculate anymore because there'd be nothing to calculate.
Yep. It all comes to zero. It stops.
Zero plus zero is
hmm
zero.
Seeing these calculations, I'm wondering, like, is this AI driven calculations? Is this
Hmm.
like some kind of mathematical AI driven system? Just saying, if
Interesting.
it's in the future, that's probably how it would be running.
That's what
Um,
I would think.
yeah. All right, moving on to 15, which it says, "And the merchants who sold her these things will stand far off and lament over her." So again, they recognize the danger. So, they were so entangled and so in sync with her that they're coming back to mourn, but then they're just like, "Oh yeah, I can't go any closer, else I risk the danger."
Mm,
Also, it almost conjures the image of Sodom and Gomorrah and how Lot, they fled, and then also his wife, well, she dallied, she lingered behind. She was too close to the fire and she was turned to a pillar of salt.
that's
And
right.
so you don't want to be too close to this
That's right.
situation. Stand far off because God's wrath and destruction is perfect.
That's right.
Don't get it on you.
That's right. That's why you got to come out of her, my people.
So you don't experience the wrath.
That's right. Hmm.
Now, this is also kind of a repeat of 18:10 and 18 verse 11, because in 18:10 they're standing off and mourning, looking at her brokenness, and then in verse 11 you see them weeping and hissing. So again, it's a repeat of the whole situation. Everybody
That's right.
mourning. There's still, this is a drawn out story about them mourning her
Hmm.
destruction.
And because it's a repeat, it's to show how dreadful, how the magnitude of what they will be experiencing is because this is a double statement to give the exponential destruction that will be upon her.
Mm-hmm. All right. 16, which it says, "Then they will say, Woe and alas, the great city Babel, was clothed with the splendor of silk, gold, and precious stones. Now, again, we have a repeat of them saying woe and alas, just like in 1810. Yeah, and then it conjures up the same mindset of 17:4 in Revelation, where she is clothed with splendor, gold, splendor, silk, and precious stones. These are matching and being consistent here in what we're reading.
So Brian, I do want to talk about a little bit about the grammar of this very first word in Revelation 18:16. It's the Vayomeru. And this is something that is quite interesting. You'll see where it says a tense mismatch. And this is something that I think we need to really consider. The Vayomer or Vayomeru is something that is what would probably be a vital verb form. The vital verb form actually was created sometime during antiquity. And it was according to a strict custom of what was used to be a suffix on a word. And so basically a vav was added in front of a yictal verb form. And so what does that really mean? It appears that what it was, it had an appearance of looking like a simple future verb. When they added the vav prefix, it then changes it to prose past tense. This is predominantly in the Torah, the prophets, and the writings of the Tanakh, right? In the Old Testament. You don't see this, or you really probably should not see this in the New Testament. Now, the reason why I say that you shouldn't see this was never, ever a spoken verb form. It was always something that they would read from the Torah, the prophets, or the writings of the Old Testament. So it's not to say that the disciples or John wouldn't know this verb form. He certainly would know this verb form. But the question is, would he write in this verb form? And my suspicion would be no, because this is not how you would communicate with others to say, this is the Vayomeru, so they said, and it would be something different. And so this is the reason why I say could be either this one word is a translation, or the sentence, the verse is a translation. And those are the things that I can't answer. We have a lot of speculation as to where this comes from, but in all honesty, we don't know as to why this one word it seems to be not something that would have been spoken by John. Now, we do have another place that we're going to see this again, and that's going to be in Revelation 18, verse 19. And we have seen this in a couple of more places. We saw this in Revelation 3, verse 8, and Revelation 12, verse 11. And so these are the four places that you see this abnormal verb form. And when you see this tense mismatch with this verb form, it just doesn't make sense to me. So my suspicion is that possibly this is something that the scribe added, changed. I don't know. And I did want to draw this to your attention and say something to consider. And what you've actually had some good thoughts on this before, Brian. What do you think about this?
Yeah, something that comes to mind is that it perhaps worked its way in. This is very common. Scribal mistakes. People start to change things, or they see a word and then they think in their head something that they know, and they end up writing what they know in their head. It's
Mhm.
just copyist mistake. Which copyist over the years? Perhaps this has been copied 3, 4 times. There's no telling which it could have worked itself in. That's just something that we find. It
Mhm.
happens in manuscripts, but that's why you look at the manuscript over the wholeness of it.
That's
You
right.
look at all the pros and cons, you look at all the Hebrew markers, all the positives and negatives, and then you start to build a case about the manuscript and its history and the route that it took, and what does that tell you. And so that's why we have good confidence, and we want to be as transparent and open as possible, even when we find the bad markers and the negative things that pop up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so if you were to jump into things like Shem Tovs, you'll see there's a lot of Greek inserts and modifications. That doesn't mean that the whole manuscript is, just throw it away and don't learn anything from it. By no means. That thing took a very interesting path as well. So these are the types of things that you have to deal with and muddle over when you're analyzing these manuscripts.
Mm. Absolutely. And then you consider that there are other markers that is in that same verse
Mm-hmm.
that you consider that, hey, those are positive markers. We just have this one negative marker. And you weigh it, like you said, all together. And I think that's why it's important that we analyze this honestly with integrity. And so that we teach everyone how to look for these verb forms and say, okay, I see that, but what else is going on here? And so this is the reason why we do the textual analysis as we do with the as much honesty and integrity that we can show you that we understand. And so that's why I wanted to bring this up, Brian, because we needed to really look at these things.
Absolutely. Thank you, Janice. All right. Now, verse 17, which it says, because within the hour all the merchandise will be destroyed, your sailors and seamen, your ships, carpenters, and barterers of your merchandise. So all the men of your war stand from far off.
You know what I find interesting about this, Brian? So all the men of your war stand off. It makes you wonder when the city, if it's a true city or if it's a country or whatever it may be, your men of war standing far off. You think about those that are deployed around the world. You think those are maybe out at sea, or maybe those that go underground or whatever it is. You think about those people and how they instantly feel severe remorse for what's going on because their lives as they once knew it is over. Every one of these people, their lives are over. Things that they've tried to achieve and they're planning for next year, that next year as they know it does not arrive. Very
Yeah,
dreadful scene.
and we know that it was destroyed by fire.
Mm-hmm,
So my reasoning would be, okay, anybody living in that city and all this merchandise gets destroyed, they're also destroyed too, the people themselves. And so this is utter destruction. And
mm,
we saw before that the merchants that they stood from far off and they were upset because the money flow and the selling and the buying is going to stop. But now we have the men of war standing far off. And
mm-hmm,
my question is, were they responsible for the destruction? Maybe these
mm.
are the military people from far off that perhaps maybe dropped a nuke on this place.
Well, that's what I'm wondering too, because it certainly would be something that if this is going to be laid waste in an hour and a day, so to speak, then this is something that's going to have to be this being a great city, in other words, this great city that if anyone were to attack this great city, it would have to be attacked all at once. And you would have to fight with everything you have all at once. In other words, if a woman is having to face a man who's about to attack her, she has to attack with everything that she has within her all at once. You can't make him angry so that he rises against her with greater force. That's what we're looking at here is this great city who probably has a great military. You're going to have to attack with all your force all at once so that they go down and stay down and not come up again.
Gone forever.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now we talked about an hour. Let's get into the hour breakdown.
Sure.
Now, the King James, let me flip over to it, and it says, "For in 1 hour, so great riches is come to naught." It's talking about the city. So within the hour, so in 1 hour. Now, the scroll of mysteries is within an hour. For
So,
in 1 hour, so on the
mhm.
hour mark, or is it within the hour? So is it 30 minutes inside the hour? Is it 40 minutes inside the hour? Or is it the full hour marking?
Well, that's a good question, Brian.
So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because this is actually for the Cochin, the first mention of the hour. Whereas before in the Greek, they mentioned the hour more than once before this point. So it's just interesting. This is a unique spot. We get a comment about a specific time frame of the destruction.
I agree. And so what's really interesting about this, Brian, is that when we're looking at this word, so if you want to look at the interlinear table, on the first table, from reading from right to left, you'll see the second word, the besha'a. That is within in by of that hour. Now, when the bet prefix is added, it's either going to have a schwa for indefinite or patak for a definite article. Now, what does all that say? It goes from be to ba if it's definite article. So in this case, we could say in the hour, which would mean that it's the patak, which has the a sound, basha'a. So now we don't know how this sounded in the day that it was written. We have no idea. Is it in an hour or the hour? Does it really matter? Does it change the context? Not really sure. It seems to be more closely related. I don't think it's going to be a big difference here, but it is in with or by the hour. So it even could be after an hour as well. Nevertheless, we're looking at something that is going to happen within a frame time that is very, very quick. And the whole point is that what I was saying a few moments ago is that it has to happen very quickly because we're talking about a very powerful place that when you're going after someone that is a pretty big contender, you want to make sure you give them all the force that you have in the beginning so they do not rise again. So this is an idiom saying this is going to happen real fast.
Mm,
And it's going to happen real fast that will we even be able to calculate this time frame because it's going to happen pretty doggone fast
mm.
because I think the whole world would be grieving to even think about what time frame this happened in.
Yeah. That resonates very much with me because when I think about the way the Hebrew language is, it's very qualitative. It's very poetic. It's very open, but also very
Correct.
detailed. And then the Greek is very westernized thinking, literal,
Mm,
quantitative. And I'm looking at the Greek word here. It's hora for that, which means an hour, literally or figuratively. And it can also mean day or instance or season or a time period. Yeah, that actually captures very much like this Hebrew word here that we
mm,
have. It's
yes.
still very open-ended, which is a little strange for the Greek to do that because a lot of times it gets
Mm.
very specific.
And,
And
and the Greek
sometimes,
usually is just very flat language.
mhm,
There's so much depth in the Hebrew language. And that's the reason why I love digging into the Semitic languages, because there's just so much there. Though when you translate it into English, it just kind of all flattens out and
mhm,
disappears. That's why many of these things have to be explained so that the entire world can see how significant the words are and what it really means. And so this is the whole point of what we're doing is to explain these things.
yep, that's why text criticism is so important because you get the extra information by digging. You get the quality, the hidden nuggets hiding behind these flat words. When you get back into original language, you start to see deep, deep meanings and concepts and links that just aren't
Absolutely.
there in the English. Well, let's go to one of those connections. Now that we have the Hebrew,
Sure.
let's turn to Ezekiel 27, verse 27. Now, tell me if this sounds familiar where we were just at in Revelation 18, verse 17. This is from Ezekiel. It says, your riches, wares, and merchandise, your mariners and pilots, your caulkers and merchandisers, all your men of war who are in you, and the entire company which is in your midst will fall into the midst of the sea on the day of your ruin. And again, this is talking about Tyre, but some of these words that we're reading about Tyre being destroyed and how it was this great bastion for merchandise and shipbuilding and ships, and how when everybody loved Tyre and it was just amazing and mind blowing. Well, we're getting the same typology and same shadow picture that we see with the great city Babel here in 17. Now, Janice, you want to point out one of these words here in particular that we came across in Ezekiel?
Sure. We have the same word that's used there in Ezekiel. And if you look on the second row and the second word on the second row, you'll see that word, mahak. That word is the exact same word that is used in Ezekiel. That means that's the strengtheners, the basically the carpenters. This is an active participle. And when you see this active participle, this is someone that is one who does these things. This is going to be either used as a noun or an adjective or as an active verb. So these are the carpenters or the strengtheners and the carpenters of the ship themselves. So, and this is the same word that you see in Ezekiel. And the second word that is the similar word is this is used in Ezekiel, bideka, which is used in this same word Ezekiel. And this is also as your caulkers. And so this particular case in Ezekiel, they used it as a noun, but you're right. It is the same word. Those two words are found in Ezekiel, and that's what you find here. It almost seems like we're talking about the same verse that's in Ezekiel.
Same type of story. Yeah, and I'm looking at the next word for merchandise, maraveka, and it's the same word, marav, that you find in Ezekiel. So we are just getting matchup after matchup for the same description that you find in Tyre as the same description you find in Revelation 18, verse 17. So that's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. So they do have this word also, ma'avravech, that is also in Ezekiel. So we do have these exact word matches in Ezekiel. And so pretty cool to see this connection because you remember, Brian, this is what we were looking for as the connections like in the four horsemen, right? In chapter 6. And we were looking for things like the 144,000. These are connections and messages for a particular reason. And what that reason is I think that it was a picture of what is going to be experienced today.
You know, it's interesting because even the same order in which it was described, you got sailors, you got pilots, you got carpenters, and you got caulkers. Then you have merchandise, then you have war or men of war. And it's the same in Ezekiel. So it's the same structure that we find in Ezekiel. That's pretty
Yes.
amazing stuff. I like to see that.
I think it is amazing because this is the key things that we look for. And I think this is the reason why we've stumbled onto so many unique findings in this Cochin Hebrew revelation that connects us to the Tanakh, which in all actually it should, right? This is the whole point is it really should connect us to the Tanakh because events like this from Jehovah are cyclical. And this is another type of cyclical event that gives us a picture of the end of days.
Absolutely. All right, moving on to verse 18, which it says, they will shout when they see the smoke and say, who is like the great ruined city?
Well, who is like it? Somebody that's been destroyed. That's who is like it.
Well, once
So
it's been turned into ruins, well, there's a lot of cities like it. I would say
there's a
Sodom,
well, I could
Gomorrah,
think of
Zohar, Babylon.
there's a lot of places that are completely, obliterated. And I think you're right. This is going to be something. So think about what you were just saying about Sodom and Gomorrah, that there's not one like this. Is this what it's implying? Is there's not one like this great city that's been destroyed like that?
Yeah, it kind of seems like it's saying this is one of a kind. This is probably so great that nobody's ever seen anything like it. And my mind would be thinking, okay, well, what happens if like three tactical nukes hit a city? Well, there's not going to be anything like it. You've never seen anything such
Well,
destruction,
that really
right?
speaks to it, right? It does. So that really speaks to the type of destruction that is coming, that
Hmm.
seems to speak of something of magnitude of bombs, of which they wouldn't have known back in the day of, the Second Temple, of anything like this. And so I agree. This, it looks like something possibly nuclear.
Yeah, can you imagine John seeing a vision of the mushroom cloud from a nuclear explosion? That
No,
would have
he wouldn't have
been
known.
something like he probably couldn't even wrap his head around. And you know,
No.
I've seen people point to a verse where it talks about the skies rolled up like a scroll, and
Yes.
they think of that as, oh, that must have been a nuclear, mushroom cloud. Okay, maybe. I don't know.
It could be. I mean, we
Mhm.
can't say that it is or isn't according to the context of the verse, but it
Mhm.
surely is implying that there has never been anything like it before.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what we should anticipate. That is not something that has never been seen before.
Mm. Now, when look at this and I compare this to the other verses, and it's interesting because our version we have who, so the
Mm-hmm.
Hebrew word is me,
Mm-hmm.
and then the English says what. You can see there with the scriptures 2009, it says what
Right.
is like the city.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the Aramaic says what is like
Mm-hmm.
the city. Well, that's a interesting way of phrasing it.
Mm-hmm.
I would think that who makes more sense than what.
Would it make sense to me? But it's a good indicator. I love the difference though, because we keep seeing videos about people talking about the Cochin Revelation, the Scroll of Mysteries, and yet we there's no one actually saying there's some pretty significant differences between the Scroll of Mysteries versus this the English from Greek translation and so forth.
Mhm.
So this these are one of those, though it seems small to others. It's very important.
Well, before we go on to the Crawford that you want to check, the the Greek word, this might give us some insight of why the English keeps saying what, and even why the
Hmm.
Aramaic says what.
Yeah, well, I'd
Well,
like to know
the
that.
word there is tis, Tis, and it can be translated as what, but it could also be translated as which, and it could also
Hmm.
be translated as who. So it
Okay.
looks like somebody made some determination that in this context, it should be what, going by the Greek. And then it's been permeated into all the languages like Aramaic and English, and all of our
Hmm.
English versions are now saying, what is like this great city?
That's interesting. And then,
Mhm.
of course, the Aramaic took that what from the Greek and made
Mhm.
it what in the Aramaic. Clearly, they
Yeah,
did. And so, well, let's look at the Crawford and see what they have. Do they have the what or the who? They have what?
right there. Says
Yeah, so
what?
it still matches the Greek. And, I'm glad that we check these things out, Brian, because
Mhm.
now we can show the world this is how it's done. This is what
Well,
you need to do.
that makes a marker. I mean, to me,
But it does.
for our version to strictly say me,
Mm-hmm.
meaning who,
Mm-hmm.
there's no other determination. If it had who or and what with it, and then maybe
Mm-hmm.
one of them got dropped off, that could explain that. But really, it's saying that it was originally who, and then when the Greek tried to translate it, they used the word that can mean who or what. And
Mm-hmm.
then the interpretation, then they just chose, well, I'm just go with what. And then now every version has what, but our Cochin now has a marker that differs from everybody else on the planet.
But you know what's interesting though, Brian? If you think about this, when the Murdoch Aramaic was translated from the Greek, clearly, that it also chose to use what? Now, was that intentional? Why would they choose what? Not that
Well,
it doesn't matter, I guess.
the Aramaic could have been looking at other translations from the
Mm,
Greek. So
that's a
like
good point.
there could have been other versions from a Greek version that they were looking at and copying from. And that's, certainly possible. Maybe they were checking with the Latin and checking with the Greek and then making their their determination of what word they want to use. It's funny that there's some wiggle room on this Greek word. It can mean a lot of different things depending on the context. But then in the Hebrew, there is no wiggle room. It's just what it is. And that would make more sense when describing
Hmm.
the city being destroyed.
I agree. Absolutely.
Moving on to verse 19, it says, Then they will throw ashes on their heads, shouting, weeping, grieving, and saying, Woe, woe, the great city Babel, because from her and all the merchants who had ships were made rich by the merchandise of the sea, and now in 1 hour everything is destroyed. It's destroyed. It's
It
all
is.
going down. And now they're mourning. They're throwing ashes on their head. This is a Hebrew idiom for
Mm.
mourning, which, to me gives me more mindset. This is supposed to be written in Hebrew. They have Hebrew thought patterns, Hebrew cultural patterns, and Hebrew mindsets like this. When you mourn, you put on sackcloth, you throw an ash on your head. This is Hebrew.
Absolutely. Now, I do want to point something out, Brian. We talked earlier about the vital verb form that is in the Tanakh that was created sometime during antiquity, and it was never a spoken verb form
Mm,
because they added a vav in front of the yiktol and so forth. This first word that we're looking at, vayizraku, this word, it looks and has an appearance of being a vital verb form. So, in other words, this looks like either this word was a translation or this verse was a translation or, you know, somebody changed it. I have no idea. We don't know what happened at this point. But if we leave it as a yiktol, which has an appearance of being a simple future tense, though a yiktol is not always a simple future tense, so I want to make that very clear. This could be also translated as more of an active tense. So I'm not saying that this is necessarily wrong, but I wanted to discuss these verb forms that has an appearance of being a yiktol verb form. And so I think that this is something that people need to consider because is it a vague toll? Could be. And that would mean that it was not there originally, or could it be just simply a yiktol where it is more like an active tense form? That is a possibility as well. So I wanted to bring that out
mhm.
so that people can have this
Yeah.
idea of what we're looking at when it comes to this verb form.
And you would say this is something that was meant to be read, not spoken.
It was so the Weichtel verb form is a past tense prose form that is in the Tanakh that was created during antiquity and never was spoken as a
Mhm,
spoken verb form. Correct. It is
mhm,
actually a prose written form that was sometime changed later and used in a prose. And the reason why it is the way it is because it gives you a timeline. So when you see this, verb form is telling you, such as the man stood up, then the man walked over to the room,
mm,
then the man sat down. It gives you a time frame of events. And so this is out of place if it is a Vayiktol verb form,
yeah.
though,
It,
it's
it,
it's questionable.
I would say the possibility of this is maybe the scribal copyist
Mhm.
knew this as a word and wanted to update the word because he didn't identify it as being correct. He identified it
Mm,
with his training. And so he made a modification to the text. That's
that is
what
true.
makes sense to me.
Absolutely. And that certainly could happen. Absolutely. So I can't argue that when I think that you could be possibly correct in
Mhm.
this.
It's a good theory, but we gotta
Mhm.
inform our audience all the little things we
Absolutely.
find. Now, I want to take our audience back again to Ezekiel because it looks like we have another matchup again with
Wow.
chapter 27. Let's go to verse 30, and I'll read that to us. And again, does this sound familiar? They will make their voice heard because of you. They will cry bitterly, cast dust on their heads. They will roll about in ashes. Verse 31, They will shave themselves completely bald because of you, gird themselves with sackcloth, and weep for you with bitterness of heart and bitter wailing. Now keep going, verse 32. In their wailing for you, they will take up lamentation and lament for you. What city is like Tyre, destroyed in the midst of the sea? So again, this is matching with this great city Babel, and this actually in Ezekiel is about Tyre. They're saying, "Let's wail, let's lament, let's throw ashes on our head." There's nothing
Yes.
like Tyre. Who is like Tyre? That great city was destroyed by the sea. Wait a second. That's what we're reading right here in Revelation.
Mm.
It's the same stuff.
It is, and it's word for word in Ezekiel that you were just reading. So, pretty interesting that like I said, this is a cyclical event that is giving us a picture, an image of what's to come, but even greater than whatever was.
Yeah, I think Tyre is a type and shadow to let us know like what this great city Babel is going to look like, and that it will be destroyed, and God is going to bring it down, but it's going to have its time. It's going to do its damage and be a big time merchandise hub, if you will, just like Tyre.
Absolutely.
All right, verse 20. Rejoice, O heavens, his set apart ones, and his prophets, for Jehovah avenges your vengeance for her.
That's
Jehovah is
right.
going to bring down the hammer because of all the terrible things that this great city Babel has done to God's chosen people, his set apart ones, and his prophets.
The time
Payback.
is up. Hmm.
Payback is coming. And
Payback is coming.
And you know, when God does his payback, it is perfect.
It is. And people have a choice, either follow the rock or the rock will follow them. And so this is a place that's been given time and time and time again and has given up that opportunity, and now the rock falls on it.
Mhm.
And notice though in the scroll of mysteries it says, for Jehovah avenges your vengeance for her.
Mhm.
And it's like, so now we've got a name called out, and now we do have a course. His name is always significant and very important because it's coming directly from him. And then you see the differences between the Greek to English, and then of course the Aramaic. And so
Yep.
now, of course, the question goes, what does the Crawford Aramaic
Yeah, let's
have?
see what they do. And they're using Al-Ha, which is God,
There you
which would
go.
be the equivalent of Elohim. Again, we're not using God's holy name. The Cochin stands alone.
The Cochin stands alone. Absolutely.
And that's a big deal. That would be a
Mm,
marker that, his name should have been there and
right.
that it's been wiped away through translating. Taking
Absolutely.
of the tradition of the ban of the name from the Jewish people, which we've discussed in earlier chapters. But this is a marker and it's more powerful.
Right. I agree. I absolutely agree.
All right. Moving on to verse 21, in which it says, Then a messenger took a great stone, like a millstone, and threw it into the sea, and said, Thus Babel will sink and not rise again. So I found this one pretty interesting
Mm,
because it's not saying he took a millstone. It says he took something like a millstone.
mm,
So it's like a round stone, a nice polished round stone that's big. You have to use two arms to pick it up, and he tossed it into the ocean, kind of like as an example, like a heavenly
right.
stone as an example that it's all going down.
Not only going down, but probably to never be remembered anymore, right? And
Mhm.
so this is going to disappear, and it will be something of a complete waste. And I keep saying this, but it surely sounds like America. I can't
Hmm.
help but say that. It sure sounds like that. I know, but I just think that it does sound like America.
Now, could we extrapolate that a meteor or asteroid might be the thing
Now
that
that's a
brings
good
down the
question.
city, having this link to Millstone?
That's a good point, Brian. I never
I'm
really
just throwing
thought
it out
about
there.
that.
I'm just,
Wow.
I'm still thinking it's probably a nuclear warfare. You got the
Mm,
military out there, everybody's watching it. But however, I mean, maybe I'm just throwing this theory out.
could be.
Meteorite, asteroid, tsunami, maybe, and then there's fire and water. Uh, just an idea. But flipping over to the King James, I noticed that there appears to be some kind of addition going on in verse 21. We see that it says, "Thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down." So we do have a millstone. However, we got this part about violence, that the great city will be destroyed. We don't see that in our version.
We don't. And
Mhm.
I don't know if that's just the King James continually adding to verses or,
Well, it's in the
or is it,
Aramaic as well, so
oh, well,
I'm
then,
I'm
okay,
thinking the Greek is doing it.
then it is in the Greek. So since they both match each other, then it's in the Greek. So then let's just
Mhm.
compare it to the Crawford and see if it also matches up, which I'm sure
Mhm.
it probably does.
Show me violence. Cast down in
Yeah,
violence and
it does.
turbulence. There it is.
So therefore, it is coming from the Greek.
Mhm.
And then, why the Scroll of Mysteries does not have it, I don't know. It,
Yeah. It seems like interpretation to me. Like
it surely does.
that the stone going into the ocean is going to churn up the water. It's going to be
Hmm.
very violent. And of course, it's a metaphor about the city being destroyed. Well,
Hmm.
how can you destroy a city without violence and turbulence, right?
Good
So
point.
it seems like it's interpretation to me. I mean, yes,
Hmm.
there's going to be violence. Fire is violent.
I agree.
But again, what we're seeing is the Cochin is tighter, clearer. And when you have these additions, they seem to be interpretation or doctrinal or
Every single
something
time.
like a priest would elaborate on, right?
I think you're right. It does seem like an elaboration, or like it sounds like marginal notes that were added into the Greek to
Mm-hmm.
say, "Here's an explanation to what I think it is." And I wonder if that's where it came from. But
Yeah, because most of them that we've seen thus far are really not needed. They
hmm.
don't add a whole lot of extra information. Unless
Hmm.
you think Greek mindset, then you can spend a whole doctrine on why does it say violence there?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, verse 22. And it says, and will not be heard again, not the sound of joy, nor a sound of rejoicing, nor the voice of a bridegroom and the voice of a bride. And no longer will there be any tool of workmanship from the masters of handcrafts, nor will the sound of a breath be heard. Mm.
That's just a terrible image of what is to come in this place. That there'll be no more hopes for tomorrow, other than that whatever is left of those who would turn their hearts and lives to Jehovah and receive the redemption of Yeshua and walk in His ways. And this sounds like just a horrible, dreadful place that is
Mhm.
just it's a terrible image that I see.
The great city Babel is gone forever. Well,
Mm,
if I'm thinking back to Nimrod and the Tower of Babel, well, that's gone forever. We have
right.
a repeat there, gone forever, and nobody lives there ever again.
Hmm.
So that's kind of interesting. I want to jump to Jeremiah chapter 50 because we again have some similarities. Now, before we turn to it, I just want to say a lot of people will read that at this point that the people who were gathered at the sea of fire and glass in heaven that they are still there at this point and they haven't come down, so that this particular destruction of the great city Babel would be something that is when the bowls of wrath are poured out. You have all this destruction happening everywhere, and then that this city is destroyed during the bowls of wrath. So I found that to be interesting when I was
That
looking
is very
into that.
interesting.
It makes sense.
Hmm.
Destruction is going around the earth. Why not have this one get destroyed along with them?
Right.
All right, let's look at Jeremiah chapter 50, and we're going to look at verse 39. Now remember, Jeremiah was a bullfrog. He was a good friend of mine.
I know him.
I couldn't help myself. Sorry. So, Jeremiah 50, and tell me if this sounds familiar. Therefore, the wild desert beast shall dwell there with jackals, and the ostrich shall dwell in it, and it shall be inhabited no more forever, nor shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation. God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah, and their neighbors, says Jehovah. So no one shall reside there, nor son of man dwell in it. And again, this is about Babylon, but it's also referencing Sodom and Gomorrah, which is something we drew from
Mhm.
earlier that, Sodom and Gomorrah is destroyed and nobody lives there anymore. Just like the ancient city Babylon, we see that here in this verse, like
Mm.
God will not want people there anymore. There's not going to be a breath heard in
No, there
this
will
city.
not be a breath heard. That's dreadful, actually. So I guess the question is, do you think that they're all dead, or did some of them? Well, I know some of them will be dead, but some of them probably were moved out to where?
You mean like the people?
The people, where
Yeah,
God's
I
people,
I
where
think
did they
God
go?
I think of two things because we know that the great city Babel, the harlot was killing God's people. And that's one of the reasons why she was guilty of God's wrath, because she was killing God's set apart ones. The blood, how much blood until God steps in? Well, some of them were killed, and I think that perhaps God will rescue some of them. And so, you know, if it's foretold, there's people who are going to make it out alive. But
Hmm.
once the destruction happens, it's like it's like Lot and his wife.
Right,
Some need to get out and some will make it, but
right,
then some might not make it. And if you don't make it, you're toast. You're going to turn
right.
into salt blocks.
So I think what this is saying is that those that are the greater exodus, right? So I know Monty Judah teaches on that a lot. And this great exodus that is happening, I think they've already left this great city and they are now on their way to Jerusalem. And so the people of God that are protected are now in a place of refuge, a place of protection.
Mm.
And so I think the people of God are taken out of this place before this happened
Yeah,
for sure.
if they're the ones that are still around and they haven't taken the mark and they're still they're still
Faithful.
doing commerce, which we saw people were still doing commerce, but
Mm-hmm.
they were still
Mm-hmm.
called God's people and said my
That's
people.
right.
So
That's right.
there's still some people there. And you know, yeah, it makes sense that God will pull them out. He might send some
Mm-hmm.
people to rescue them or call them
Absolutely.
out of the cities. And God
Possibly the
says, come out of there.
144,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, he says, "Come out of there, my people." And
Mm.
so I
Yeah.
I think that this might be where the 144,000 will be the ones to lead them out. If I remember correctly, Eddie Chumney did a teaching on that many years ago, and that the 144,000, according to his teaching, was that they would be leading them out in this great exodus. And I think that that is a possibility that they will be leading them out to go to Israel, and they will be those that are protected.
I was thinking, my interpretation would be that the 144,000 are on the sea of fire and glass with all the other resurrected people. You think they stay through on the earth?
Well, I think they do. I mean, my presumption is that they stay on the earth because the people on the earth they need guidance if they are truly repentant. And if you think about this, Brian, all of this is about bringing the people to repentance. It's still grace. Even though there's fires and explosions and creatures and all these terrible things going on,
Mm.
this is still grace and mercy. Now, what is the truest definition of grace and mercy? And that's giving everything that is required and needed to bring a people to repentance. And so this is grace and mercy, is stopping the people from this sin and bringing them to a place of repentance. And sometimes that hurts. It hurts because you've gone in such rebellion for a long time, and now you're being forced to drop to your knees and repent. And those things hurt. And I think they need a people to guide them to the place that they were to go. That's at least my theory.
Yeah. See, I was thinking that the 144,000 after this destruction then comes down and then they lead the people. But it's just placing where do you place the greater
It's a
exodus
good question.
is a
I
little
don't know.
different. Now, I just want to flip over to the King James because I want to point out, as much information that we know, each verse, I'm crazy detailed oriented and I don't want to leave stuff behind, but there are some words that are added in here. Seem like it gives it a different flair. You see it in the King James, and it says, and the voice of the harpers and musicians and of pipers and trumpeters, those words of music there is not in the Cochin. We don't see that.
We
And
don't
then
see
it
that.
it, it just says the sound of joy nor the sound of rejoicing. So
Hmm.
just celebration. We don't hear celebration, but they went on to talk about music and specific instruments,
Hmm.
which is quite interesting that it went did that. At the end of the verse, and the sound of a millstone shall be heard no more. Well, we don't have millstone in ours. We just have masters of handcrafts. So just
So
working. We don't have this specific to a millstone.
no, we don't. But I guess it's kind of implied in the Masters of the Handicrafts, I guess.
Mhm.
I mean, I could see it, but it's just certainly not the same as what we have in the King
Mhm.
James, that's for sure.
Yeah, because millstone is something that is unique to grinding
Hmm.
either olives, or grinding wheat or even
Hmm.
barley. It's very
True.
unique niche. But workmen's handcrafts, that's more open ended.
Hmm.
And you look at the Aramaic, we don't see millstone. We don't see a lot of things in there. It's a lot shorter sentence.
It is different.
Just talks about trade.
Interesting. That is very, very short. And it doesn't match the Greek. So I guess the question we have is what does the Crawford have? Is
Yep.
it missing all of this as well?
That's a lot longer sentence that I'm seeing here.
Yeah, I do see that we have, well, that has the voice of the bridegroom.
hmm Which was in both of them.
Okay.
We just see entanglements,
Entanglements.
commerce, and entanglements. So I
Interesting.
mean, it's kind of in between all of them.
Yeah, I don't see the
Doesn't have
the
millstone.
similarities that we had, right? I don't see those
Mhm.
with the so this verse seems to be different in all of them, which is interesting. So, where these things came from, I don't know, but it is fascinating.
So looking at the Greek, it
Hmm.
says mulos, and that literally means mill or millstone, a grinding millstone. So no other way around it. The Greek
Hmm.
is making it very clear. We're talking about a millstone here. But our Hebrew, we don't have millstone.
We don't have millstone, and it looks like the Aramaic, the Murdoch Aramaic doesn't have it, and neither does the Crawford Aramaic. And even those two were different from and the other. And so we've got a lot of variations here, unusually so.
Mm-hmm. All right, 23, which it says, nor will a light shine in any den because of the merchants were the rulers on the ground, for by witchcraft they incited all the people.
Yeah, every time I think about witchcraft and witches and the prescription of what comes to them, this is death. Absolutely, they are to be killed. Jehovah says, kill those witches. And so now they're being cited by witchcraft. And I find that they're using in the Greek to English the drug sorcery.
Mm,
Brian, what's interesting is that now this is one of the main arguments that I've heard about her pharmakia, which is the Greek term, right? The
mhm,
pharmakia. And I I come out of the medical community. I've been a registered nurse for many years, 30 plus years. And this has always been something that's been a fascination for me, that when you see the snake on the pole thing, the pharmakia, whether it's pharmacy, physicians, the nursing, and everything that has this symbol, this logo, the pharmacy that is actually being led out of America, because it's America, and this is another reason why that America is believed to be the one heading this up, that is the one that's going to be destroyed, is because America is pushing her sorceries. Now, the sorcery is pharmakia, as we said in Greek, but it's kisuf, that is their kisufeka, is that your sorceries or your witchcrafts. This is actually coming through. I believe that it is actually coming through the medicines, the pharmacy,
Hmm.
the pharmaceutical
Well,
industry.
that's where pharmaceuticals gets their name from pharmakia. Pharmacy
Mm-hmm,
comes from sorcery. But
mm-hmm,
it's interesting that kisuf is the meaning is sorceries, magic, and witchcraft. But also pharmakia gets translated as sorcery, but
mm-hmm,
it also means magic and witchcraft. So they share the exact same meaning. You don't
mm-hmm.
lose any meaning when you change from Greek to Hebrew on this particular.
You don't. And that's the point that I'm trying to say, is that this pharmaceutical industry that used to be of good, used to do good at one point in time, that it is actually, it seems to be more like witchcraft or sorceries today. And America leads the way on the sorceries that is pushed around this world for, hey, take this drug, and oh, hey, why don't we all get a shot? And so we can't say it on this channel because it would
Uh,
take our video down.
yeah,
But that's the point, is that the America would be pushing this. And of course, the censorship of that you can't even say the word, is that it's a deception tool. And I think this is the reason why a lot of people say America is it,
yeah.
because America is the one country that is pushing and sending this off to other countries as well,
At this
leading
day
the
and
way.
time, yeah, in this day and
Mm-hmm.
time, looking at it through our lens of what's around us,
Mm-hmm.
America is the one that fits the best of this because they are the number
Mm-hmm.
one pharmaceutical maker
Mm-hmm.
and developer. Most of our drugs come from the American government and
Mm-hmm.
development, NIH and FDA and our
Mm-hmm.
universities. So it's quite alarming
Of
because
course.
they're just getting us used to, taking the drugs, taking the
Mm-hmm.
toxins, taking the chemicals,
Mm-hmm.
taking the mind control.
Yep.
Uh-huh. So
And the
they're just
mark of the
prepping
beast.
us and wearing us down, and eventually we are just little blobs that do their will. But
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting to me because the whole world, I mean, this is all pharmakia, it's all witchcraft, sorcery.
Mm-hmm.
It's allopathic medicine.
Mm-hmm.
It's whatever your symptoms are, will cover it up.
Mm-hmm.
Chemicals and toxins and maybe even mind control will mess with your
And
brain.
exactly.
And that's
Or
not what God intended. What
no, or
God
let's
wants
change your
is,
DNA, right, Brian?
yeah,
Let's
that's
just
a big
change
one.
it. So, oh, that's a huge
Yeah.
one. Now you don't have the DNA that has the name of Jehovah in it, like you and I have talked about before.
And you're pre-coded to have cancer and die after
Yes.
certain years.
Yes.
So whatever you do, just unplug from the system. The system is
Unplug.
designed to milk you, to make you
Mm-hmm.
a cash register for them, to take
Mm-hmm.
all your money, make you sick, never ever cure you of any diseases.
Mm-hmm.
That's what, that's the great city Babel right there.
Right,
Sell
because
you a bunch of things and make
they
money off
make
of
more
you.
money, Brian, when you're sick.
Hmm.
There's more money in you being sick. There's no money in you being well. So there's no incentive to make you well. There is an incentive to make you sick.
Yeah, it's funny because they call it health care. Well,
Mm-hmm.
they don't care about your health. It's disease management. That's what it
Now
is.
it's right, because we don't want the disease to go away. So you'll see when a lot of the oncologists will say, we're going to manage your cancer, we're going to manage your disease. And it's like, so you don't see the word cure often because they don't like the word cure. And
Because
so
they're not in a business of curing. They're in a
no,
business of selling.
that's right.
selling medicines,
That's right.
treatments.
Pharmakia.
Yeah. Well, it's a good thing God's going to bring it down. It's going to be no more.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And they're not going to entice the world. Now, let's flip over to the King James.
Sure.
We see that there's some more added stuff. Starts with where it says, voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all of thee. Now, that is something that we saw back in verse 22.
It is.
So it looks like the part that we saw in 22 is now further down into verse 23 in the English. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of interesting how that one got kind of moved a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Our final verse, verse 24, and it says, and in her was found the blood of the holy ones, the prophets, and from all those killed on the ground. And so there you
Wow.
go. That is what they were doing. They were killing people, especially
Mm-hmm.
God's people and the prophets. So again, she is ripe for the revenge and justice delivered from God, is
Mm-hmm.
worthy of the wrath.
Wow.
So my question is when I see this, now I don't have an answer, but was this city rounding up God's people? Was it storing them or was it just rounding them up and killing them? Was it back in the verse where we read about them dealing in slavery? Were they taking God's people and putting them into
Mm-hmm.
trafficking and slavery?
Or FEMA camps and death
Maybe,
camps. Mm-hmm.
certainly possible. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes chapter 18. And we got good news. God destroyed this great city, Babel. Where I'm from, they say payback from way back. That's what God is delivering to these people who went after his people. And so that's good news. And guess what? We're going to get good news from here. It is better and better and better. Again, we had to go through all the terrible stuff, all the tribulation, all the wrath to get to the good stuff. And now we're starting to trend up into the good stuff. I told you at the beginning of this that we're going to have a happy ending. Well, for those who are with God and love God and are doing righteously. So it's a happy ending for some, and for others, it's not a happy ending. For others, it's fire. They get fire. So with that being said, I want to say, Janice, you got anything you'd like to share with our audience before we tune out?
Well, thank you, Brian. And it has been an interesting chapter. And what I enjoyed about this is that there will be no more of this pharmakia stuff, right? There'll be no more of this sorcery witchcraft. And I love that. But I do want to encourage our viewers to download their own copy. We are continually also publishing the chapters of the Cochin Hebrew Matthew. So go to projecttruthministries.org and download your own copies. We do not require payment for anything. God's word is free. We don't charge for it. But it is something that we want you to dig into and we want you to study with us. We want to have integrity and honesty with this, and we want to hear from you. We are getting all these wonderful messages, and we love you guys, and we're thankful for every single one of you. You guys have a blessed one.
Yeah. Like I say all the time, your positive comments are like wind in our sails. It just motivates us and gets us going. And so we love you and we just want to keep pouring our love onto you and giving everything out for free. So God bless you. We want to encourage you to keep reading your Bibles. And as always, God bless.